What started as a routine late-night interview turned into one of the most uncomfortable, jaw-dropping moments in recent television history. A studio full of people expecting charm and wit ended up witnessing something far more intense. It began. Like any other celebrity appearance, Meghan Markle, polished and prepared, walked on stage to friendly applause. But by the time the segment ended, she was visibly shaken, her voice breaking, her eyes filled with tears. All because Seth Meyers decided to do something very few hosts dare to do. He asked real questions, and he did not back down. Tonight, we are diving into the explosive exchange that left viewers stunned, sparked headlines across the world, and forced one of the most talked about public figures to confront the very foundation of her image. What happens when a celebrity's carefully crafted narrative is challenged live on air? What happens when the truth starts to crack through the surface? This story is not just about Meghan or Seth, it is about power, responsibility, and what happens when someone stops playing along. Make sure to hit subscribe and stay with us, because what you are about to witness is not just another celebrity moment. It is a masterclass in public accountability. And it gets very real, very fast. Hit subscribe and comment below. Was Seth too harsh, or was this the truth that needed to be said? Let us get into it. The studio lights glowed softly, casting that familiar warmth across the late night with Seth Meyers' stage. The crowd clapped on cue, the band played its cheerful riff, and the camera panned to the host sitting behind his desk with his usual easy smile. Everything felt normal, just like it always does on these kinds of shows. Seth adjusted his suit, jacket, gave the camera a slight grin, and turned toward the guest chair. That was when Meghan Markle walked on stage. She moved with grace, smiling wide, giving a polite wave to the cheering audience. The applause was loud but respectful, the kind you would expect for someone who had spent years under a global spotlight. She looked confident, comfortable, polished. Her posture was perfect, her outfit simple but elegant, and the moment she sat down across from Seth, it seemed like this would be another smooth, feel-good segment. Something easy to digest. Something that would trend on social media for all the right reasons. Seth welcomed her warmly, making a couple of light jokes. To ease into the interview, Meghan laughed along. They talked briefly about her life after stepping away from royal duties. She mentioned spending more time on causes she cares about, enjoying family time, and working behind the scenes on her foundation. It was the kind of friendly banter that makes viewers relax. No tension, no surprises. Just two familiar faces, talking about safe topics. Then the conversation shifted slightly. Seth leaned in, his tone still friendly. He asked about her recent humanitarian trip to Africa. Meghan lit up. She spoke with genuine warmth about meeting young women, visiting schools, and supporting grassroots organizations. Her voice carried passion. She described the energy in the classrooms, the resilience of the girls she met, and the commitment of the communities fighting for change. You could tell she had rehearsed some of it, but it did not feel fake. It felt like she meant it. The audience listened closely. People at home likely nodded along. It was the kind of story everyone likes to hear. Inspiring, hopeful, safe. No one had any reason to believe what was coming next. Seth waited until Meghan finished her story about the young girls she met in Africa. She had described the energy in the classrooms, the joy in the faces of students, and the pride of local teachers. The audience was still nodding along when he leaned slightly forward in his chair. His voice remained calm, but there was a shift in his tone. Just enough to signal that something was coming. He smiled politely and said, "That sounds like an incredible experience. I want to ask you about a part of your speech you gave at the school in Johannesburg." Meghan's smile stayed in place. She adjusted her posture, ready for the follow-up. This was familiar ground. A question about her speech was something she had been briefed on. She replied icily, "That speech was really important to me. I wanted to highlight how lack of access to education holds back entire generations." I shared some of the numbers we have gathered with our partners. The statistics are tough to hear, but I think that is what makes people pay attention. Seth nodded along, still polite, still conversational. Then he said, "Right. You mentioned in that speech that only 42% of young girls in the region are currently enrolled in school. That is a powerful number. I actually had my team look into it." The room did not go silent right away. It was a slow shift. The energy dropped just enough for the audience to feel it. Meghan's smile faltered for a second, but she recovered quickly. "Well, those figures were drawn from several sources," she replied, keeping her voice steady. "My team works closely with international organizations. Some of the numbers come from combined reports. Different agencies collect data differently, so they do not always match exactly, but the point is the same." Seth's expression did not change much, but his eyes stayed locked on hers. "That makes sense. The thing is, when we looked at the data from groups like UNESCO, UNICEF, and the World Bank, we could not find any report that listed 42% for that region. Most of the data shows enrollment rates that are significantly higher." The weight of his words settled heavily. In the room, the audience stopped shifting in their seats. Meghan blinked a few times, her smile now more controlled than natural. She nodded slightly and said, "Well, data collection in those areas can be inconsistent. I think what really matters is bringing awareness to the issue." Seth did not back off. His tone stayed calm but firm. "Awareness is important, of course, but when someone in your position gives a specific number on a global stage, people assume it is accurate. They trust that what you are saying is based on verified research. That trust is part of what gives the message its power." Meghan's expression did not fully change, but something in her posture shifted. Her shoulders were still straight, but her hands tightened just a little in her lap. The room felt different now. What started as an easy back and forth was turning into something else. The audience could feel it. Viewers at home could see it. This was not just an interview anymore. It was becoming a test. Meghan took a quiet breath and adjusted her hands in her lap. She gave a small smile and said, "I think we are getting caught up in details that might miss the bigger picture. What matters is that people are finally having conversations about these issues. That young girls in these regions are getting attention and support. Whether the number is 42% or something else, the important thing is the awareness it brings." Seth kept his gaze steady. He nodded slightly but did not step away from the point. His tone stayed even, but there was no mistaking the shift in the air. "I understand what you are saying," he replied, "but the numbers are not just details. They matter. When you speak on a platform like this, or in front of a school, or at an international conference, people take your words seriously. They repeat them, they quote them. And if those numbers are off, the message starts to lose trust. Not just yours, but the trust in the entire cause." There was a quiet tension growing in the room. The audience was still, watching closely. Even the camera crew seemed more careful with their movements. Meghan sat a little straighter in her chair. Her smile remained, but it was tighter now. "More controlled, she replied. "Well, my team works with a number of organizations. Sometimes, the way information is collected can vary. The percentages may differ slightly depending on the method. I think what matters is that girls are not getting the education they deserve, and we need to do more." Seth paused for a moment. Then he leaned slightly forward. "I want to talk about something else you said recently. At the Women's Empowerment Conference last spring, you mentioned that you personally funded 30 scholarships for young women entering university. That is a powerful claim. But when we followed up on it, we could not find any public record or confirmation from the organizations involved." Meghan blinked. For the first time, the shift was visible on her face. She kept her tone level, but her eyes were more focused now, more cautious. "I do not always share the full details of my charitable work publicly," she said. "Some things happen quietly. Not everything needs to be announced with a press release." Seth nodded again, but did not back off. "That makes sense," but reporters reached out to those organizations. They could not find any records. The institutions themselves had no comment, and in some cases, they said they were not aware of the scholarships at all. "That is why I am asking." Meghan's voice had more of an edge now. "I care about these causes. I am deeply involved, and sometimes things take time to be fully set up, but my intentions are always genuine. I am trying to help." Her hands moved slightly, no longer folded neatly in her lap. One now gripped the armrest of the chair. The strain in her voice was subtle but clear. Seth replied, "I am not questioning whether you care. I am asking whether the statements you make are always backed up by facts. Because when they are not, people stop trusting what you say." The mask was beginning to slip. The control, the polish, the calm responses, it was all starting to crack. The studio was quiet. No one moved. No one spoke. The tension was no longer a slow build. It was sitting right there, in plain sight. Meghan sat still, trying to keep her voice steady. Her eyes did not leave Seth's, but something in her expression had shifted. The confidence from earlier was fading. There was a flicker of confusion, maybe disbelief. She took a breath, then spoke with a voice that was softer now, almost shaking. "Seth, I do not understand why you are doing this. Why are you attacking me? I came here to talk about work that is helping people. I have given so much of myself to these causes. I have spent years trying to make a difference. And now, I feel like you are trying to tear it all down, on national television." Her words hung in the air, more fragile than defensive. The audience was dead silent. No coughs, no movement. It felt like the entire room had stopped breathing. Seth did not flinch. He kept his posture calm, his voice low and direct. "I am not attacking you, Meghan. This is not cruelty. This is accountability. You are one of the most talked about figures in the world. When you speak, people listen. So when you make claims, they matter. They deserve to be accurate." Meghan blinked a few times. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. She reached up and brushed a hand through her hair, then placed it back in her lap. Her fingers were trembling. It was not dramatic, but it was visible. She tried to steady her breathing before speaking again. "This is exactly why I stepped away from public life. Because no matter what I say, no matter what I try to do, there is always someone trying to rip it apart. I came here with good intentions, and now it feels like I am being punished for caring. Seth gave her a moment, letting the silence settle. Then he leaned in slightly. I believe that you care. I am not saying you do not, but caring is not enough when you have this much influence. The people watching, the people you are trying to help, they need more than good intentions. They need truth. They need someone they can trust. Meghan's eyes welled up. Her voice cracked just slightly as she replied, "Do you really think I am doing all this just for attention? Do you think I made up the work I have done? I have sat in rooms with women who have nothing. I have looked into their eyes and promised to fight for them. And now you are making me feel like none of that matters." Seth shook his head slowly. "That is not what I am saying. What I am saying is that the promises you make in those rooms, the things you say at those conferences, they echo far beyond that moment. And when those words turn out to be inaccurate, it does not just hurt your image. It hurts the trust people have in the causes you claim to support." Meghan looked down for a moment. Her hands gripped the arms of her chair. Now her jaw clenched. A single tear slid down her cheek. She wiped it quickly, but the audience saw it. Everyone saw it. She was trying hard to hold it together, but the emotions were winning. She looked back up and whispered, "This is not fair. You are using my words against me. You are trying to catch me in some kind of trap. That is not what this was supposed to be." Seth's tone softened, just slightly. "I am not trying to trap you. I am asking you to stand by the things you have said. That is what accountability looks like. If you want to lead these conversations, if you want to be the voice for people without one, then you have to hold yourself to a higher standard." Meghan looked stunned. She opened her mouth as if to respond, but no words came out right away. Her breathing was shallow now, and her face had gone pale. She looked like someone who had just realized the ground under her was not as solid as she believed. The public unraveling was no longer subtle. It was happening in real time, right in front of everyone, and there was no script to hide behind. Seth took a breath and leaned forward just slightly. His voice stayed calm, but there was a sharpness in it now. The tension had been building, and this was the moment it tipped. He looked at Meghan and said, "I want to bring up something else. When you spoke at the Women's Empowerment Conference last spring, you said you personally funded 30 scholarships for girls entering university. That claim made headlines, but when journalists tried to verify it, they could not find any public record, no documentation, and when they reached out to the organizations you mentioned, there was no response. In some cases, they said they had never worked with you." The silence that followed was deep. Meghan's face stiffened. Her hands gripped the armrest of the chair again. You could see the confusion in her eyes, the disbelief that this was still going. She tried to stay composed. "There are things I do privately. I do not always make announcements when I help someone. Not everything needs a press release." Seth nodded. He was not being aggressive, just steady. "That is fair. But the moment you mention it in a public speech, it becomes part of the public record. It becomes something people look into. When there is no trace of it, when the organizations involved say they have no information, that raises questions." Meghan blinked a few times, her lips pressed into a line. She seemed to be holding back something. Her voice, when she spoke, again, was softer, less polished. "I wanted to do it. One really did. I had meetings, I had calls. We talked about how to structure the program. But the funding was not finalized when I gave that speech. I was excited, I believed it would happen, and I just, I got ahead of myself." Seth stayed quiet. He let the moment breathe. Meghan looked down at her hands, then back up at him. Her voice cracked slightly. "I said it like it was already done, because I wanted it to be true. I wanted to believe it so much that I convinced myself it was close enough." For the first time all night, her words felt completely unfiltered. There was no spin, no perfect phrasing. Just someone caught in a moment they could no longer control. The audience, who had spent the last few minutes sitting in stunned silence, seemed to shift slightly. You could feel it. The mood was no longer pure judgment. Something had changed. Meghan continued, "I made mistakes. I let my hope get in the way of reality. And that is not fair to anyone. Not to the people I want to help, not to the people who believed in me." There was a long pause. Her voice had dropped. It felt like the weight of it all had finally landed. Seth leaned back in his chair. His expression had softened, but he still looked straight at her. He had pushed for honesty. And now that it was here, the entire room felt different. Not lighter, but more real. Seth gave her a moment. The room was still heavy with emotion, but he leaned forward again, his voice softer now. "Do you understand why this matters, Meghan? Why getting it right is not just a detail, but a responsibility?" Meghan sat still. She wiped under her eye and nodded slowly. Her voice came out quieter than before, a little shaky but honest. "I do now. I understand that people believed in me, that they trusted me to speak on their behalf, and I let them down. Not just tonight, but every time I spoke about something, without knowing all the facts." She paused, then looked down for a second before meeting Seth's eyes again. "I thought I was doing good. I wanted so badly to be useful, but I see now that wanting to help is not the same as actually helping. I see how much damage it can cause when someone like me makes mistakes like this." Seth nodded. His tone stayed firm, but not unkind. "Apologies are important, but they are not enough. What matters now is what you do next. You have a platform that most people will never have. If you really want to fix this, you need to go back, correct the record, and show people that the truth still matters to you." Meghan took a slow breath. Her hands were folded again, but the tension in her shoulders was still visible. "I do not know if I should keep speaking out. Maybe I need to step away. Maybe I have done more harm than good." Seth leaned back slightly and let that thought sit in the air. Then he said, "Or maybe this is where the real work starts. Not the speeches, not the headlines, just the work. Quiet, careful, real. You could still rebuild, but it would take time, and it would take proof. No more promises, just action." Meghan looked up. Her expression was tired, but something in her eyes had changed. She was listening now, not defending, and that might have been the first real step forward. Meghan took a deep breath and looked directly into the camera for the first time that night. Her face was still marked by emotion, her voice quieter now, but clear. "I want to say something to the people watching. I owe you all an apology. I owe the organizations I spoke about an apology. I owe the young women I claimed to support an apology. I was not honest in the way I should have been. I got caught up in trying to sound inspiring, and in doing that, I let my words get ahead of the truth." She paused, her eyes still fixed on the lens. "I understand now what real advocacy actually takes. It is not just about showing up or speaking out. It is about facts. It is about transparency. It is about making sure that the things I say reflect the work that is actually happening, not just the work I hope will happen. I have learned that the hard way tonight." The studio was still. Then Seth leaned forward slightly. He did not smile. His voice was calm but firm. "Scrutiny is not cruelty, Meghan. It is necessary. Because when someone has your platform, your words can move people. But that only matters if people trust those words. That trust has to be earned." Meghan nodded, her expression serious. There were no more tears. Just a look of someone who had been forced to see herself in a way she had not expected. The studio audience began to clap. It was not loud. It was not for drama. It was for the honesty, for the clarity, for a moment that felt more real than anything that had come before. As the cameras pulled back and the lights began to dim, the message was clear. Accountability is not about shame, it is about truth. And tonight, truth finally got its moment. So what do you think? Was Seth being too aggressive, or was he just asking the questions that needed to be asked? Some people believe he went too far, while others say this is exactly the kind of honesty we need more of from our public figures. When someone has a platform that reaches millions, should their words be held to a higher standard? When influence is global, does that mean accountability must be too? Or should good intentions be enough? Let me know what you think in the comments. We want to hear from you, and make sure to subscribe, because we are just getting started. There are more stories, more confrontations, and more truth coming your way.